Hello, welcome to the Bigger Truth Show. I am Scott McMahon, and wow, we did it. If you're anything like me, you stayed up late last night, and you might be a little foggy, a little sleep deprived. I had 2 nights in a row. I actually slept, I think, 7 hours in the last 2 nights combined, because I went to Grand Rapids for Trump's very last campaign rally and on the night before, and I didn't get home from that. That was in Grand Rapids, 2.5 hours away almost, and so I didn't get home until like 4:30 on that night, and then um couldn't sleep, just so much going on. And then last night was just wild, and I pole challenged in Detroit at the AV counting board until I was almost 6. I don't know. I got home at 7:30. So, so here we are, but it's good, and I'm just glad to be alive. And hello, Rayanne. It's good to see you. So yeah, it is. Last night was a very good night, and um, I've been talking about causes for optimism and hope and all this, and I knew on Monday, it was very clear to me that Trump was going to win, and it was so interesting to see. Um, first, ran. Oh, you were at the rally. Awesome. That's great. Yeah, it was really a good night and morning. Trump didn't even take the stage until 12:30 in the morning, and it was his 4th rally in 3 states in one day, um, and so he was obviously running a little late. I think he didn't even take the stage in Pennsylvania until almost 10 o'clock, and, um, at the rally before, but yeah, so it was pretty clear that Trump was going to win. When I was looking at the data, I was given some kinda internal modeling data for the, from the RNC, and it showed that in every single swing state, the number of rural voters was up significantly. The number of urban voters was down significantly, and the number of female voters was down significantly. And so, that was a really strong indication. And then I also shared some internal modeling data here in Michigan, and that showed that as of Saturday, that in absentee voting, that was outperforming 2020, what he did in 2020 by 375,000 votes. And that was as of Saturday, and I was told it was even better as of Monday, and that, factoring in early voting. And so that what that meant is that, so if there was fraud in 2020, which I do believe there was, I don't believe that. I think that there was massive ballot injection. I don't think that 81 million votes for Biden was organic. But so if there was fraud in 2020, that meant that in order to, because Biden won Michigan by 150,000 votes or 160,000 votes, and Trump was outperforming Biden by um, or outperforming his 2020 performance by almost 500,000 votes. That meant that not only were they going to have to steal as many ballots or inject as many ballots as they injected in 2020, but they were going to have to do even more by another uh, 300,000 plus. So and I didn't think that they were even going to be able to match what they did in 2020, because the RNC has done, Chris LaCivita, Susie Wiles, Michael Watley, uh, Laura Trump. They had done such an amazing job of recruiting an army of poll challengers. And I was one of many of them. But even more importantly, having good legal representation on the ground, boots on the ground in major polling sites and absentee ballot counting sites in Detroit, where it was a problem before. And I also saw that and Michael Watley in particular, and the RNC had filed just a large number of very effective uh, lawsuits that were designed at holding secretaries of state accountable to their own state laws. And would they were very different than all the lawsuits by the election integrity grifters in the Flynn network that were trying to change laws. The so those would never be successful. You know, but these RNC lawsuits, they were just aimed at holding the secretaries of state accountable to the state laws that were already in existence, and and they were almost entirely successful. Almost all of Watley's lawsuits were successful because they were well conceived. They were realistic, and they weren't looking to try to win everything or change the law. They were just trying to hold accountable to the fullest extent possible. And one example is getting more Republican. The law says that it should strive for parity of Republican and Democrat poll workers, and that at every um, uh, adjudication to or at every when there's adjudication and duplication, that there needs to be a Democrat and a Republican at each table. And there was. There weren't before the lawsuit, but there was a lawsuit, and that it forced them to hire more Republicans. And there in Detroit, there was at least one Republican at every table, as far as I could tell. And uh, so, and the way to tell them is they just looked happier. You could tell that they were happier, just happier people. Yeah, I could tell even last week. Yeah, just more relaxed and happier people. So, um, not that all Democrats are unhappy people, but I think you know what I mean. Um, so Sherry Ward says, "I'm so proud to know you, my friend. I just thank you. I am I won my race for Lapeer County Commission too, and I put that in God's hands. The story behind I'll just tell a little bit of the story behind that. Um, I It was not something that I sought out. I did run for the same position in a different district that I lived in a different district in 2022 in the same county, and I lost when I ran before, and then my I moved, and my buddy was in that district, and Tom Coleman, he was um, the chairman of the board of commissioners, and he came to me and he says, I really want to just focus on my family. I want to step down, and you're the only person that I would want to take my place." And so we went in an hour before the deadline to file, and he removed his name, and I put my name in, and nobody was going to run against him because he's very popular. And so I was the Republican on the ballot, but the local establishment doesn't like me very much. I really don't seek enemies. I just I don't have any animus towards these people, but they have a lot towards me. And so they actually raised up a candidate to run as an independent against me, who worked really hard and really outworked me. But thanks to Trump and thanks to straight party tickets, I won by a 2-to-1 margin. So, and I spent a lot of time in prayer, and I said, "Okay, God, if you open this door and this is what you want me to do, you're going to make it happen, and I'll walk through it, and I will do my best to be obedient and faithful to the position." And so here we are. So, um, and Rayanne says that uh, she wishes Mike Rogers would have won. Absolutely, I completely agree with you, and I'm going to get into that a little bit more. Barb says, "So glad for you." Thank you, Barb. Appreciate it. Um, so yeah, so it's just a little thing, me being on the county commission, but the part of the reason why I wanted to do it is I just wanted to walk my talk. And I think it's just so important that we get involved in. I really believe that the Republican Party is the best solution to our political problems, and there's that we have a lot of problems that aren't political that the Republican Party can't solve, and looking to politics to try to solve um, problems like social and cultural problems, I think is a huge mistake. But as far as political problems, I do believe that the Republican Party is by far the best solution that we have to those problems. And Trump really demonstrated that by, he did not try to start his own party. He did not run as a third party candidate. He ran as a Republican because he saw that is the case, and he's transformed the Republican Party. His influence has really had a transformative effect on the Republican Party. And I think that for any one of us, getting involved in the Republican Party should be like it's kind of my pastor said once, he says, yeah, I said, I'm kind of, I have some baggage. I tend to display, displace the boat, when I get into it. Because, and I don't know, it's just a part of my personality. I don't think, I mean, you can tell me if I'm wrong, but I don't think that I'm really that confrontational. I don't know. I see a problem, I'm going to point it out, but he said, it's normal. My pastor said it's normal when we have a new member that they step into the boat and the boat sinks a little bit, and and then it balances out. And and I think that's the same with the Republican Party, so and every single one of us should have an effect, and we should have an impact on how the party runs, and it's a position of responsibility, not rights. But if you want to get involved and to help to improve our situation politically, the Republican Party is the way to do it. Grassroots Ari and Garrett, Saldana, thank you so much for joining. You say, hey, brother, looking elite. I don't know. I don't feel elite, but I appreciate that. And actually, since you're here, Garrett, I want to share your video. You posted a video this morning, and
you all to watch this video. We're going to analyze this.
So you asked, are there any places that the vice president is overperforming Joe Biden in 2020? So we could show you that as well. We just bring that out here. Harris overperforming 2020.
Holy smokes.
There you go. So let this go away and see if there's anything on the east side there.
Literally nothing?
Literally nothing.
Literally.
Yeah, I love his inflection. Yeah, literally nothing. Oh, it's beautiful.
Not one county?
Now, my initial reaction of that video, like many of you, is I smiled and I laughed. And then I started to dig a little deeper. And I started to ask some questions. Not one area. Now, I know there's still some states coming in and there's still some votes out there. But was the voter turnout that much larger for Joe Biden than Kamala Harris this time around? Well, if that's so, then what about Trump's turnout of vote from 2020 compared to now? Look at this graph. When you look at this graph, it's kind of interesting, isn't it? There was an unbelievable amount of voter turnout in 2020, especially in the Democratic side.
Okay, so I want to explain what this graph is because it might be hard for you to see. So this is the last 4 presidential elections. The blue votes are the votes for the Democrat candidate, and the red bars are the votes for the Republican candidate. And it's very interesting, of course, the spike in particular for the Democrat candidate. And I think that the clearest, the reason why I think most people that I have spoken to ever about who believe that there is election fraud, their fundamental argument is, I don't believe that Joe Biden got 81 million votes. I completely agree with that argument. It defies reason. What that was a 30% jump over Hillary Clinton and over Barack Obama. This is just, and they were, they had huge support. The Democrat Party their get out the vote operation is like they are using like Star Wars laser guided missiles, and we're throwing rocks. I mean, that's really an apt description as far as the technology, their organization, their coordination, their funding, the number of employees and operatives that they have. It really is like we are throwing rocks and they have laser guided missiles. But we win because we've got better ideas and better people and more honest and sincere people. And yeah, so but this I'll let Garrett finish here.
makes you question. All of us conspiracy theorists, I'm not even going to say the word because I'll get clipped with the algorithms, but something doesn't add up.
And yeah, so certainly something doesn't add up, and I don't really care about getting clipped by the algorithm. So, um, yeah, but and not that there's anything wrong with caring about that, but I'm just not good at watching my words. So maybe that's why I get myself in so much trouble. Um, but um, the clearly there it's an abnormality, and it's difficult to explain that there could be such a spike in Democrat votes in 2020. And then why wasn't, but then there, it brings up a lot of questions. So why wasn't there that spike this time around? And like I said, I think that there was more transparency, more control, and so it was harder. And also those bars are going to go up as all the votes are counted. In Arizona, for example, still only 58% of the votes are counted, and I'll talk about that more in a minute. But the um, there is, and I still think that there was fraud. I think that um, what Matt DePerno and others exposed a week ago in the qualified voter file was uh, it's hard to explain that based on an export error, which was the official explanation from the Secretary of State's office. And what they saw was between I've talked to a couple different analysts now, and I've gotten two different pictures of slightly different pictures of what happened there and what happened afterwards. But um, there were 125 between 125 and 168,000 more votes than voters in the qualified voter file. Now, the qualified voter file is kind of like the voter roll. It's the list of it's just a list. It's a list of all the voters, and it's a list. It has all their information that's in the voter roll, so name, address, that kind of thing, voter ID number, and then it also shows which elections they voted in. And so and Matt DePerno shared an image of one voter that voted 29 times, and that went viral, and 5 million people saw it. And then Laura Trump responded to that saying it was a glitch. We investigated. It's a glitch. Don't worry about it. There's nothing to see here. And I I said when that happened that I think that was not accurate, but um and I don't think it was accurate. I think that what happened there, and based on conversations I've had with people that I don't have direct, I wasn't in the room, and I haven't spoken directly with somebody who was in the room, but I've spoken to people who have told me that they've spoken to people that were in the room. So it's indirect information here. So I just want to give that caveat. But I have heard this from a couple different sources who have both talked to people who are in the room. Um, but that there was a lot of panic and discord in at Mar-a-Lago over Matt DePerno's tweet, and also the story that was in the Gateway Pundit, but primarily over Matt DePerno's tweet because it got a lot of traction. And um, there were factions within the RNC and Trump's team that wanted to really focus on that and do an in-depth investigation, and there were other factions that did not want that. And the reason why they didn't want that is because they didn't want to risk depressing the vote, because they were very cognizant of what I've called the machine fraud psyop and the effect of the belief that the machines can flip infinite number of votes, and there's unlimited voter fraud, and it's all rigged, so what's the point? And that in 2022, that's what caused the red wave to become a red trickle. And the Trump team was really focused on being too big to rig, and they were completely, and that they were. It was a successful strategy, and this was a political calculation on Laura Trump's part, and it was I think it was the correct political calculation. Does it mean that she was being completely truthful? um I, I still don't know. and in talking to after talking to one analyst, I thought, no, she's not being truthful. But then I talked to another analyst that got the updated QVF after the Secretary of State said that it was corrected, and the number of overvotes. So there were 125,000 more votes than voters before the correction, and then after the correction, there's only one more voter vote than voter. And so, but it was completely nobody's been able to tell me yet if there were voters added, if there were votes removed, or what happened, because at the same time with that, they also suddenly put in all the early voting data. So there was just it's very clear that file was manipulated. I do not believe that the so what they take is they take that qualified voter file and then they produce the voter roll. The voter roll then is given to the canvasser, and they have another week or so to provide the canvassers, the board of canvassers. And so there's a board of canvassers for, I believe, for each county. There's a board of canvassers, and there's two Republicans and two Democrats on each board. And so they are, and these are people that are not analysts. They're not data analysts. They're given a summary of the voter roll, and that says the breakdown of how many votes, how many voters, and which, it's very clear that there's some level of manipulation in that it's not reliable data, but they're just given those summaries, like the executive summary of the voter roll of the qualified voter file, and then they're given the tabulator receipts, and they're supposed to balance with each other and match up. In 2020, in Wayne County, which is Detroit, they did not at all balance. They were way off of balance, and uh, and and so for that reason, the Republican canvassers initially said that they were going to reject it. They were put under maximum pressure, and even their children's schools were doxxed publicly. They were threatened. It was absolute intimidation by the Democrats. It was terrible what they were put through, and very traumatic for them, from what I understand. And they ended up changing their votes and voting to certify in 2020. I don't think that that's going to happen this year. I think that it's going to appear to balance, but they're not people who have the training, the expertise, or the ability to look beyond the executive summary that they're given and analyze and determine whether or not that's accurate data. And that data is not going to be published before the board of canvassers looks at it. So nobody's going to be able to put eyes on that on that voter roll, what the information that the board of canvassers is going to be given. And they're so nobody's gonna be able to look at that and analyze it and say, okay, yeah, this is accurate, before the board of canvassers are given it. And that clearly is not a transparent, or that's not a process that's going to build voter trust and confidence. But Jocelyn Benson has proven over and over again that she has no interest in building our trust and confidence. And um, you know, what the bottom line here is that the the system that produces the software system that all of the clerks use that produces the data is deeply flawed. Now that system was created initially by the prior Secretary of State, Ruth Johnson, and then in 2017, and then Jocelyn Benson inherited it. But she has had 6 years, and she's now blaming Ruth Johnson for this, saying, "Well, it was Ruth Johnson's fault. She created this software." And typical Democrat, right? I mean, just blaming and not taking any responsibility. But this is really she has not done a single thing to improve the system. And what I've heard from clerks is that it was so bad that every time a clerk would input a new voter, they would have to shut down the software and restart it. Otherwise, it would create, if you did two or more in a row, it would create errors within the QVF. So, I mean, this is just completely unacceptable. And, did she enable it? I think that at a minimum, this is gross negligence on her part. Now she's planning on running for governor in 26. Jocelyn Benson is going to be running for governor in 26. I think she should be removed from office now. And I would hope that there would be some sort of an effort to do so, because she's demonstrated now 3 times that she's not capable of running a free, a fair, transparent, and trustworthy election. And so there's some comments about this that one Barb says too big to rig worked. It absolutely did. And the other thing that the other aspect of this, and this goes back to Garrett's chart that he shared, is that it's reasonable to assume that to a certain extent, Democrat turnout was down, because I can't imagine that Democrats liked not being allowed to vote and have a voice in the selection of their nominee. And clearly that they were given a pretty trashy nominee and running mate. Just they were really the worst ticket imaginable. I mean, it was really pretty bad. And there have been probably worse ones in the past, but these were this was a really bad ticket for the Democrats. And so I would understand why some Democrat voters might choose to stay home. And so that could explain at least part of it, but I don't think it explains a 20% decrease. I mean, that's a lot. So, and this right here, Ray said, hoping he demands an audit. I assume you're talking about Mike Rogers, and I don't think he will. From what I understand, I spoke to somebody who talked to him this morning, and he is not planning on challenging it or, um, demanding an audit. We don't know if the information that the board of canvassers is given is going to balance or not. We have no idea, and I kind of doubt. I doubt it will, but we won't know. And they've also said Jocelyn Benson has directly intimidated canvassers, indicating that for months now that that they could be committing a crime if they don't certify the election. And that, in line with Tina Peters, what happened to Tina Peters and all this, I think, this is just how lawfare has been used, one way that lawfare has been used against us. Lauren says, sounds like AP is declaring Slotkin the winner now. I think the Dems conceded the presidency and are clinging to whatever they can in Congress. Yeah, and that's certainly true. And there were, so the last I looked, checked, he was down. Mike Rogers was down by like 9,000 votes, with 98% voted, of the votes counted. And I'm sure that there were more ballots than that injected. And my feeling, just looking at the data all along in 2020, that it was probably, that there could have been 300,000 ballots injected here in Michigan. And that was partly due to my buddy Tom and I. We did a mailing. It was kind of like we used First Class Mail to do an unofficial canvas, partial sample canvas in after the 2020 election, where we selected mail-in voters, so absentee voters in our little township, and we just sent out, I think it was 150 first class letters, and it was just kind of an unofficial canvas, just asking them, for no real personal information, just whether or not they voted, saying, hey, we saw that you voted absentee. We just wanted to confirm that you voted. And we didn't get very many responses, which we didn't expect, but we used first class mail because if it was undeliverable, then it would have been returned to us. And because this is only we did this, I think it was in January or February. So because it was only just a few weeks after the or a few months after the election, they should not have been returned to us, because these were ballots that were mailed out just a few months before. And so the likelihood that after the election we would have a meaningful number of these things returned to us was just very small. But we ended up having, I think it was 9 or 10 of these out of 150 that were returned to us. And so that and that was just in this little conservative, this little red township. And that's not it couldn't be explained to me to my satisfaction just by being a random error. They were returned to us as being undeliverable, and these were the addresses that actual ballots were delivered to and received from. So I believe that had there been a bigger study of that in 2020, we would have seen that a very similar trend there. But there's speculation. In a lot of ways, it's a perfect crime because it's really, really hard to prove, right? And all we have is the data, and we really, really desperately. So the Flynn camp, they take over. I've talked a lot about how they've taken over state Republican parties. We saw it here in Michigan. We saw how, and we saw how Pete Hoekstra has resuscitated the state party. He brought it back from death. I mean, it was bankrupt. It was hopelessly divided. It's so much so that President Trump was planning on sending all the pass-through money to be spent in Michigan through Illinois if Christina Caramo hadn't been removed. And last night when I was in Novi, I took this video right here of him.
We've seen Trump pull ahead in Pennsylvania. We have seen him pull ahead in Wisconsin. And soon you will see the numbers scroll across the screen. In Michigan, Donald Trump 49.2 and Kamala Harris 49. Now, as we all know, that doesn't mean we've won. What it does mean is the trends are all moving in our direction, and we are going to accomplish, I think, tonight, what we set out to do 7 months ago as a Michigan Republican Party, as a group of conservatives across this state. The objective that I put in place, that we put in place, it wasn't about politics inside the party. It was all about electing Donald Trump, Mike Rogers, congressional candidates all along the ticket, and we're getting close to achieving our objective.
That's just so sweet. So that was kind of early on in the night. That was right before I left to go to Detroit, and I talked to a couple people who were there this morning, and it was a particularly sweet night for Pete Hoekstra, as it really well should have been. He was under attack just even to this day by the insurgents, the anti-Republican insurgents who are still loyal to Christina Caramo and who should really be removed from the state party. I think that they are they're working against the interests of the state party, and these are people like Ken Buyer, Lori Skibo, Braden Jacobazi, and Samantha Strayer, Deb L, Deb Ross, Joe Moss, Joe Welsh, Dan Bonamy. These people need to be removed from the party. The people who had positions of responsibility on Anna Camp, these people, they really do need to be removed from the party, and because they have actively thwarted the efforts of the party. They have worked against Trump, and they are largely responsible for Mike Rogers' loss, because they have, to this very day, they have worked against Mike Rogers, and they've worked to persuade voters, okay, if you're going to vote for Trump, that's fine, but don't vote for Rogers. And you see that kind of stuff on their Telegram channels and in their messaging. They really instilled a lot of hatred against and towards Mike Rogers, and I think that's just completely wrong. After the primary, you support your candidate, and they were not doing that. and by doing that, they really prove themselves that they're not Republicans, and so I believe they should be removed. Kim Harris, all these people that are leaders in this, that have worked against, and I think everybody who has slandered Pete Hoekstra, you know, and and that led the booing of Pete Hoekstra at the last convention. I think it's terrible. It's a disgrace. It is a disgrace, and it should be a source of shame on us that this happened within the party, and it's terrible. So, uh, I think it's horrible, and it's happening all across the country. And I'm going to give another example of that in Arizona in a minute. But um, the same thing has happened within the election integrity movement. So the same way that they have brought shame upon the party, they really brought shame upon the election integrity movement by filing lawsuits that were designed to fail. An example is one that Stephanie Lambert filed just last week, that and brain fog. Pat Colbeck was all over promoting this as, this is going to change, fix our elections. and and it was a clerk was wanting to try to prevent, so the VAT, the voter assisted terminals, is the only place in Michigan where there's touchscreen voting. And I've said often that touchscreen voting is really terrible. And there's nothing good about touchscreen voting, because it's a difficult, it's actually a true black box. You don't necessarily know what you're getting out of it. It's not like you don't have, sometimes there's the touchscreen voting that prints out a ballot, but it's not the ballot that's scanned, it's the QR code or barcode that's scanned, and it's just not a good system. And so, but the VATs nationwide, and Benson put out a statement about this, that the Dominion VATs, or touchscreen voting nationwide, was having problems where you'd tap on one thing and it would produce something else. And so they wanted to do a software update, like a patch, to fix that, which is a completely reasonable thing to do. you know? And Stephanie Lambert was suing to try to prevent that patch. And that lawsuit, it was going to fail because it was in violation of state law. There's nothing, there was no legal justification for the lawsuit, and it was dismissed within 48 hours. I think it was dismissed on Monday morning. But that's what they do. They file these lawsuits that are just so ridiculous that judges roll their eyes as soon as they see a new lawsuit before they even read it, on election integrity. And that's a big part of what they've done. And so I think one of the lessons of this election is that it's very clear, I mean, this election should really prove that there's no machine fraud, or that that there may be vulnerabilities in the machine. We got to shore those vulnerabilities up, but there is no machine fraud. There's no machine vote flipping. It just doesn't happen. And maybe it happens on some scales, with touchscreen voting. I think that's one thing, but when you have a paper record, an auditable paper record, they don't want to get caught, and so they're much more likely to engage in various schemes um, to inject ballots than to, because it's a lot harder to get caught. And so I think what's really needed is, and the Flynn Network, the other thing that they've done is they've engaged in a massive distraction. They've had this mantra: we need paper ballots, one day voting, no machines. They've here in Michigan, they say that all the time, but we already have paper ballots. So, that's dumb. And most states have paper ballots, or at least a paper record, that's printed out for if they have touchscreen voting. So yeah, we do need paper ballots, but one day voting and no machines is just, it's politically impossible. Those things aren't going to happen. And it's a complete distraction from what we really need, which is voter ID. We need mandatory voter ID for every in-person and absentee voter. And Oklahoma has a great way of doing that, which is on the absentee ballot itself, it must be notarized in order to be accepted and counted. And so you have to present your ID to a notary public in order to get it notarized. And they also have a rule that a notary public can only notarize 20 up to 20 or 30 ballots. So you can't have one kind of corrupt notary notarizing thousands of ballots and then disappearing, going off to another state. So there's some real good controls. And I talked to somebody I think it was in Tulsa County, that said that uh, about 4% of the absentee ballots in this election were rejected because they didn't follow the rules. And that's what there should be. So in Detroit, there weren't any ballots that were rejected. I didn't see any ballots rejected the whole time I was there. Um, and so that's we need, we need to have some security there, and voter ID is really important. We need meaningful. There's three things that we need. The first is voter ID. Second one is we need meaningful voter roll reform. And what we need is third parties. There are far left NGOs that are able to access and add voters to the voter roll on their own computers without the local clerk even knowing about it. That is terrible. It needs to stop immediately. And that's the from what I understand, that's the ERIC system. It's terrible. It needs to be eliminated. The only two entities that should be able to input a new voter onto the voter roll is the local clerk and the Secretary of State. Period. The second aspect that we need is we need complete transparency. The voter rolls should be public on every local clerk's website and on the Secretary of State's website without a FOIA, without having to pay for it. You should be able to just go, anybody should be able to go and look at the voter roll, and it should be public and transparent so that you can see whether it's being manipulated and how. And then the third thing there is that we need a clear and realistic process for challenging somebody who is dead or moved or whatever, or a duplicate for ourselves. If we find that, there needs to be a simple, clear, and quick process for removing a bad voter, somebody that's not a bad person, but somebody that's not a real voter, or challenging somebody based on their citizenship status, whatever. And there needs to be a way to do that. Now, obviously that could be gamed, and there needs to be some protection control, but those things, there's solutions for that. It's not rocket science, but we need that kind of reform in our voter rolls. Otherwise, how can we trust the election when the data is itself a black box? The data is a bigger black box than the tabulators are, because with the tabulators we do have the ballots that can be recounted, but with the data we don't know what, garbage in, garbage out. We don't even know. The data is a true black box, and that needs to be reformed. And then the third thing is we need risk limiting audits. So we can we have a risk limiting audit now, but it's garbage. We need a meaningful and in-depth risk limiting audit that the public can trust, that is truly random, and that just makes sense. I mean, so those three things: voter ID, and instead of paper ballots, one day voting, no machines. It's an impossible thing, politically impossible, and it's not even worth it. And it won't solve the problem, and that's by design. They didn't want to solve the problem. There's a reason why we don't have voter ID still today, 4 years after the vast majority of Americans wanted voter ID across the board after the 2020 election. We still don't have it because I believe, and I blame, the Flynn Network taking over the election integrity movement, acting like a bunch of lunatics, and filing a bunch of lunatic, idiotic lawsuits, causing people to believe all kinds of crazy conspiracy theories, causing people to believe that all judges are corrupt when they're not. These are bad lawsuits, and then also causing future lawsuits to struggle because they're creating a bias in judges' minds against the whole concept. And that's all by design, and by leading all of us under the wrong rock and into solutions that are not solutions, and that's by design. So the solution that we need is voter ID, and this should be our mantra for election integrity: voter ID, meaningful voter roll reform, and meaningful risk limiting audits. Let's keep early voting. Let's keep absentee voting because it's convenient. We want it to be easy to vote. And we're not going to be able to get that. People have grown accustomed to that. So, we're not going to be able to politically. And it's good. It should be easy to vote for real people and for citizens. And, it should be as easy as possible to vote. We don't, it shouldn't be something where you wait in line for 4 hours in order to vote. And, it should be something that is as reasonably easy and there needs to be protections. And I think that is really based on talking to lots of different people about potential solutions. Those three things, that should be our mantra: voter ID, risk limiting audits, and meaningful voter roll reform. So I hope that can kind of catch on. And I think that's just so important. And we need to stop listening to Pat Colbeck, Mike Lindell, Patrick Byrne, Mike Flynn. These people are not Dr. Frank, David Clements, Joe Altman, Seth Keshel, all the people that claim to be election integrity experts that have been stealing money, grifting money off of, and the everybody involved with the America Project, everybody, the America Project is a Flynn op. So all of these people that have been taking money from hardworking Americans, saying that we're going to be fixing the election, or we're going to restore our elections, we're going to engage in all these lawsuits, and they talk about all the lawsuits that they're filing, and they're all designed to fail, and then they blame the judges, causing people to be demoralized, hopeless, anxious. That's the psyop. It's all a psyop, and we've got to just say no to it. It's garbage. And all of the people that have done that, they're guilty. And I don't know that they're guilty of crimes. To me, it's a form of fraud, but in my opinion, but we the people need to reject them. We just need to reject that. It's just nonsense. Let's ignore them. They just need to be ignored. And there's nothing that they can say that should persuade us of anything that they say. In fact, we should actually think, okay, that's probably not true. If Pat Colbeck is pushing something, it's probably an op. It's probably a psyop. And if Mike Lindell is pushing something, anybody that, that's a part of this, our first instinct should be, okay, let's question that. That's probably not true because of the source, because they've proven themselves to be completely unreliable. And then let's go for actual solutions. And so I hope that's helpful. Now I want to give an example. There's an issue that I've talked about quite a bit, which it has really concerned me. And that is there were propositions especially in red states throughout the country, to bring in not just open primaries, but they call it open primaries, but it's really a jungle primary. And a jungle primary is where there's no Democrat primary or Republican primary. There's just a primary, and all candidates go into this. So it's like a preliminary general election. And they do this under the guise of making it fair for independents, because in many states, there's more independents than there are Republicans or Democrats now. So they're trying to appeal to independents with this. In Arizona, there was more than $10 million spent promoting Prop 140, which would have created jungle primaries and ranked choice voting. Now, ranked choice voting, you have to provide a first, second, and third choice. And if you only vote for the one candidate that you want, your vote doesn't count. That's how it is. It's so twisted, and it can be completely gamed by if one of the two parties only puts forward two candidates in the primary, and they're instructed to vote for those, first and second, and then make sure that they vote for the leading Republican third, then it's very conceivable that even if a party is in the minority, that they could end up with both of the top two candidates if the Republicans don't vote in similar unified fashion, or if they put forward a whole bunch of candidates that dilute their vote, which we always do, right? So it would take a red state and put them in a situation where in the general election in a red state, the two candidates in the general are both Democrats. I mean, it is sick stuff. And fortunately, so far, it looks like it's going to fail in Arizona. But I was very worried about it because there was over $10 million spent for it. And the Republican Party had only spent $5,000 against it. And not only that, but Turning Point's Austin Smith created a competing proposition, which I'm not sure if that one's going to pass or not. I hope it passes, because what it does is it says into the state constitution that these jungle primaries, open primaries, and ranked choice voting are unconstitutional according to the state constitution. So I think that is on its surface a good thing, but there's also state law that says that when there's two competing constitutional amendments on the ballot, the one that gets the higher vote is the one that wins. And so it kind of opens the door in some ways to increase the likelihood that 140 could pass. And it would have been better if there was just a very clear yes no vote. Fortunately, right now, it's about 60-40, but there's only 58% of the vote counted in Arizona. And I want to talk to the reasons for that, because the Republican Party Arizona Republican Party is completely run by insurgents. Shelby Bush really runs a lot of the party, and so does Kari Lake. And Kari Lake is very much like Christina Caramo here in Michigan, that whereas Christina Caramo had a handler, Mike Labadie, who had self-professed ties to the intelligence community and was a Democrat that came here speaking language of ultra MAGA Christianese, Christian nationalism, and took over the party, drove it into the ground, created this where this situation where we actually had two state parties for 2 months in this critical election year. The first 2 months of Pete Hoekstra's 7 months that he had to try to revive the party and bring a victory for Trump. The first 2 months of that, we had two state parties. Christina Caramo wasn't stepping down, and she was still declaring herself the chair. Two state parties, two bank accounts, two email lists, two two websites. We had two state parties, two executive committees and teams. It was crazy. It was absolutely crazy. And finally, a judge removed her. But in a similar way that she was handled by Mike Labadie, Kari Lake, I have argued, I believe, is handled by Caroline Wren. And I did a report on that back in, I think it was in May, that went into quite a bit of depth on that, and showing her connections with John McCain and Lindsey Graham, and even with the whole Flynn camp and Roger Stone and all that. So there's just a lot of problems. And it looks like if Kari Lake loses her Senate bid, which it looks like she's likely to, then she apparently plans to run for state party chair. It's just, they run the same operation, the same game plan. It's just like we're repeating history here. And so in Pima County, I talked to a friend in Pima County, which is Tucson, the second largest county in the state. The Pima Republican Party is just a mess. It's a mess. And I could tell a lot of stories, but they failed each party in Arizona, the way it works is each party has an allotment of poll workers that they can recruit and present. So, and that's how they get parity between the parties and the people counting votes. So the Democrat Party gets to hire a certain, or basically offer, this is our list of Democrat poll workers, and then the local clerk or the recorder there hires those people. And then the same with the Republicans. But the Republican Party only filled like 10% or less of their poll worker slots. So the result of that is that they're understaffed, they don't have enough poll workers, and they're all Democrats. And from what I understand, Maricopa is very similar. It's not that much different. And these are the people that say, well, we can have enough people to hand count ballots. We don't need machines. We can hand count ballots. But they're not even putting forward enough people to count the ballots with the machines. And that's a much smaller number of people. They're not even putting forward that many people. So how can they're just, to me, this is very hard to explain, apart from this is an insurgency designed to cause Republicans to lose. It's very hard to explain any other way. So, so that's a big part of the reason why, and their processes are terrible. Their Secretary of State is very much like Jocelyn Benson, Adrian Fontes, and who, by the way, the state party chair, Gina Swoboda, who had donated at least 60 times to Hillary Clinton. She's given over the course of her life, at least before this cycle started, she had donated more to Democrats than to Republicans. And here she is, the state Republican Party chair. Make that make sense, right? And she actually filed an amicus brief on behalf of Adrian Fontes in order to allow people who could not prove citizenship, 218,000 people who could not prove citizenship, to have a full ballot against state law. She filed an amicus brief to that in the last 2 weeks. And this is, it's hard to make this stuff up. It just, the patterns are all there. They are working. This is an insurgency working against within the Republican Party. Within the Reawaken Tour is an insurgency against the American church, trying to make churches into political organizations. Citizens Defending Freedom is doing that now. That's a Flynn aligned organization. They did the same thing to the election integrity movement. They're doing the same thing, America's Future. They're doing the same thing to the anti-human trafficking movement right now. That's something that I plan to talk about more in the very near future. And they did to the health and freedom movement. I mean, that was something that the infringements upon our freedoms in COVID is something that should have united and brought together a huge group of people from across the political spectrum in the same way that Trump is actually able to accomplish. I mean, he's been able to accomplish that despite being completely under attack. And so where I want to end is that these people have for months now been thwarting Trump's campaign. Patrick Burns, the Ann Vanderseals, the whole network. They have been thwarting Trump's campaign by incessantly promoting psyops and narratives and messages designed to cause Trump's voters to be demoralized, hopeless, angry, fearful. This is the exact opposite emotions that Trump wants his voters to have. And you see that very clearly, that they're all of their side. They were doing this all the way up through yesterday. All they were talking about was election fraud, making up stories about election fraud. And they were pushing this. We're going to lose, trying to get as many people not to vote and to believe at least that, even though they were saying go vote, they were trying to get people to believe that it's hopeless. So what's the point? All the way up to the end. And then once it was clear that Trump was going to win, then they completely changed tune. And all of a sudden they're taking credit for the victory and saying, oh, look what we did. We've got this great victory. And I'm going to just share a little bit of this because it's unbelievable. It's really, really unbelievable.
Guiding and directing us. We have all been incredibly persecuted. Owen put in prison, Steve Bannon, the total harassment, Roger Stone, General Flynn, the former head of the Defense Intelligence Agency, National Security Advisor to President Trump, who they tried to destroy, but we have been vindicated. And General Flynn said this morning he could feel God's spirit moving, and his gut told him Trump was going to win.
Okay, so General Flynn can feel God's spirit moving. Okay, this is the 7 rays of light. This is the person that leads a whole auditorium in prayer, declaring that we're freeborn and we shall remain freeborn. That is the antithesis. That's an antichrist spirit right there. The notion of being freeborn is the complete opposite of a Christian understanding of who we are.
Ladies and gentlemen, he has been working tirelessly, and he joins us now. He's been all over Florida fighting today. General, thank you for the times you've joined us today. You've been very gracious. Please, if you can, as much time as you've got, give us a 35,000-foot view, then zoom in. But as you said today, this morning with me, when you predicted the victory, you said, listen, we don't have time to celebrate. This is a major battle, but we've got to secure the victory, and it goes into high gear once he is president-elect. So I'm getting chills right now. General, we're listening to you, one of the most respected generals in modern history, one of the only good ones we've seen in decades. That's why they came after you. You're our general. You're advising Trump. What do we do?
No, Trump's our general, dude. Trump is our general. It's not Flynn. Flynn is not our general. And if Flynn is your general, I strongly suggest you are a free person. You're not in the military. You're not obligated to follow Flynn as your general, and I strongly suggest you at least questioning and taking a step back and saying, okay, why am I following Flynn?
Do, General.
Okay, so I said to you this morning, and I'm in a place I'm already looking at. I'm starting to move boxes out of government offices. This is the kind of stuff that we're going to start doing. So I said to you this morning, Alex, that we in the military we use this phrase "fight through the objective," which means you seize the objective, which was the victory that we just sustained tonight, and this is a great victory. Not only the White House, but the Senate and the House. So we are now going to go back in. The Democratic Party is dead. Mainstream media or the corporate woke media is dead. These are has-beens. These are bygone eras that are no longer there. And now what we have to do that we've achieved this objective.
And it's not true that the Democrat Party is dead. You know, the stuff that he's saying is just not really true. I mean, there were still, you know, it was Trump only had about a 1% margin of victory. Now, you know, like I said, I think that there still were ballots that were injected. I don't think that there was nearly as many as in 2020, but you know, there still are a lot of Democrats, and he's been pushing this whole idea that, well, if there wasn't election fraud, Trump would win all 50 states. It's hogwash. He would not have won all 50 states. There is no way that he would have won all 50 states. And I don't know that he would have won that many more states than he did. Let's go on.
We have to fight through the objective, which means that there is going to be much more work. There's going to be greater sacrifice. And that's going to start, you know, I want everybody that's listening, anybody that's still awake, get some sleep, get some rest, and take a deep breath. Enjoy this victory for a short period of time. Feel good about it. Stay humble. Stay ready. Stay strong. And then we are going to move from this point on up until the inauguration. Donald Trump, he knows that he has got to stay alive, because that's one of the other problems that we're.
So he's just putting forward. He's continuing to put forward this whole idea and promote this idea that Trump's going to get assassinated. Oh. Yeah, and so Barb says, yeah, now Flynn's going to try to ride on Trump's coattails. And Lady Blue says, Alex Jones is a bald-faced, stinking, cowardly liar, according to Bill Cooper. I don't know too much about Bill Cooper. I'll look into it more, but yeah, I probably would disagree with that. These clowns are panicking. Flynn makes my stomach churn. And yeah, that's the case. I mean, why not? Why not? I mean, he always sounds angry, but why not just say, hey, this is fantastic? I mean, this is just me that he sounds angry. I mean, he doesn't sound joyful. This is just fantastic. Let's be happy. Let's enjoy this. And let's look to Trump for leadership, because he's a good leader. Instead, he wants to be the leader. He's trying to make himself relevant, and he's just grasping to that. And but they're throughout. I'm going to end with this right here, which is Ivan Raiklin. And this is what they're doing. They're trying to take credit. They're trying to say, yeah, we've been supporting him all along. And here's Ivan Raiklin. This is and I said, this is the fakest thing I've ever seen in my life. And it really, truly is. Ivan Raiklin sharing the Bible verse of the day, John 14:27. I am leaving you with a gift, peace of mind and heart. And the peace I give is a gift the world cannot give. So don't be troubled or afraid. That is the absolute 100% diametrically opposite thing that of everything that has ever come out of Ivan Raiklin's mouth. It's just, you know, it's a great verse. I love it. I love the whole Bible. But to hear that coming from Ivan Raiklin is just the most grotesque hypocrisy I have ever heard. And he's doing this to try to cover for himself, to try to hide and pretend like he's not who he really is. And Patrick Byrne's doing the same thing, talking about how great, and they're trying to build up Flynn. They're really trying to build him up. They are really, really desperately hoping that Flynn is going to. That's their current op. I think their current priority is to try to get Flynn a spot within Trump's administration. I don't think it's going to happen. We will see. Maybe Trump will give him some sort of a meaningless position where he doesn't really have much power and can't do too much harm just in order to keep tabs on him. I don't know. We'll see what happens. But And I don't know that even Trump knows exactly what he's going to do right there yet. So, but I trust Trump to make the best decision that he can. I do believe that there are people within his organization. You know, I do believe that, for example, Christina Bobb um, is going to have some sort of a role in the administration, and she was in Afghanistan with Flynn and McChrystal as a JAG. So, you know, I have concerns about that. But hey, Trump's a big boy, and he clearly is making much better choices. He just ran the best campaign that I think any of us have ever seen for any office. Is just an absolutely Herculean task, and he was able to bring together so many different people, so many different backgrounds, so many different interests, and bring them all together into. And he formed a movement as people were literally shooting him in the face, doing everything they could to contradict all of his messaging and narratives from within our side, within and targeting and influencing, running influence ops against his own base, while also having the mainstream media doing everything they were doing against him, big tech doing everything they were doing to try to move people away from him. And it's extraordinary. It is absolutely extraordinary what he has accomplished and what we've accomplished. You know, I think all of us have done some level of work beyond just voting for ourselves or voting ourselves to ensure this. And this is something that we all have accomplished. I think it's a wonderful thing. And so let's enjoy it. And I think that the far better message than what Flynn and Alex Jones are putting out, which is look at how great we are, is look at how great Trump is. He did a great job, and look at how great God is more than anything else. And you know, I've been trying to share a hopeful message over the last couple weeks, especially as there's been so much anxiety and fear about what has happened. That, you know, God is in control, and that doesn't mean He's necessarily going to give us exactly what we want, because that's not the way He works. He gives us what's best for us, and sometimes that appears to be, at least in the moment, the opposite of what we want. But He is in control, and so He has blessed us, chosen in by His grace to bless us as a nation with a better choice. And I think that we need to guard ourselves against having too high of expectations or unrealistic expectations. We don't know, you know, Trump's not going to be perfect. He's not a perfect man, and he's not a perfect leader, but he's good. And what we've been given that right now is something that's better than what we've had, and we don't deserve it, and we should thank God for it. And let's enjoy what happens, and let's look for the opportunities to do the work that whatever it is that comes before us. Here in Michigan, for example, we need to start working now to make sure that Jocelyn Benson does not become our next governor. That would be absolutely catastrophic. And we need good people in office in the executive branch. We need good people in the Secretary of State. We need to. I think we should. I would love to see, and we'll see if people step up and make this happen. But I would love to see an effort to recall Jocelyn Benson for incompetence. And she clearly is. She's at best she's incompetent. You know, I don't know if she has malintent. I believe, I personally, that's my opinion, that she probably does. But you know, it's a difficult thing to prove. But clearly, she is not fit to run an election that we can really trust the outcome of. And so I think it's possible that a recall effort could be successful, and it would also likely kill her gubernatorial aspirations. So I think that would be good, but I trust other people's judgment. And you know, there's work to do, and so but let's enjoy it for another day. Let's get some rest. And I appreciate you. I appreciate all the congratulations and everything for my little race. And I appreciate your support and your interest. My Substack is biggertruthmedia.com. If you're new to me, I will be posting this there, and I have all of my archives available there and investigative reports. I'm working on some other investigative reports that I plan to publish here in upcoming weeks, and some other projects as well. So it's a great way to support me, and I don't have any big, unlike what Patrick Byrd and Tom Renz suggested last week, and Roger Stone. I don't have any deep state donors. I don't have any large funders. I just have just you. And so I'm grateful for you and your support and look forward to continuing this together. Thank you.